Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a really fascinating narrative approach to something pretty rare, an internal management masterclass from JP Morganchase's Jamie Dimon. We're going to treat this like a detective's case file, digging into the hidden culprits that destroy corporate empires from the inside out, and, the everyday heroics it takes to keep them alive.
So let's start with this massive, fundamental question. Why exactly do $700 billion companies just disappear? How does a company with endless resources, brilliant talent, and a massive global footprint just cease to exist? Well, it's rarely a sudden, dramatic market crash. Actually, it's almost always a slow, invisible decay.
To figure out how this happens, we've organized these insights into a 5-part dossier. We'll be looking at the cost of complacency, the illusion of numbers, eradicating corporate bureaucracy, common sense customer focus, and finally, leadership and human capital.
All right, let's open file number 1, the cost of complacency. Let's look at the overarching threat that brings these titans to their knees. Think about the stark contrast between adaptable giants and companies that just failed to adjust. You've got your Apples, your Amazons, your Walmarts. They adapted to the times. But then you have Sears, Kmart, Washington Mutual, Silicon Valley Bank. They didn't just have one bad quarter, right? They fundamentally failed to adapt to their environments. And the financial world is especially brutal here because institutions can hide their decay with leverage right up until the exact moment they collapse.
Dimon points out that it isn't just bad luck taking these massive companies down. It's an internal disease. We're talking complacency, bureaucracy, arrogance, and slow speed. These are the ultimate corporate cancers. When teams start buying into their own hype and move at a glacial pace, well, the end is already written. It's literally the narrative arc of almost every failed empire.
Moving on to Section 2, the illusion of numbers. If you think a financial spreadsheet is always objective, absolute truth, well, you're in for a shock. So the crucial takeaway here is that audit whitewashing, just smoothing things over to keep regulators happy, creates this incredibly dangerous echo chamber. Dimon actually remembers reading internal audit reports claiming everything was perfectly fine, and he just bluntly responded, "We suck." And honestly, admitting we suck is step 1 to fixing the problem. Hiding weaknesses behind neat little numbers just guarantees you're going to get blindsided later.
The profit and loss statement can be an absolute masterclass in deception. We see cases where costs were just lazily lumped together by headcount, which caused these massive structural inaccuracies. Things like massive expat packages and executive compensation were entirely pinned on the investment bank. Meanwhile, the huge costs of running data centers were just charged out equally to everyone, even departments that didn't use them at all. It's a crazy story of how lazy math totally distorts reality.
And because of those sloppy accounting practices, the consumer bank was actually subsidizing the trading floors to the tune of $2 billion. $2 billion every single year. Imagine trying to make strategic business decisions when your internal map is off by $2 billion. It just shows why you absolutely have to interrogate your expenses instead of accepting them as gospel.
Okay, Section 3, eradicating corporate bureaucracy. This is where our case file gets genuinely wild, looking at how big companies literally invent work for themselves.
Bureaucracy actively strangles a business. Dimon has a great quote for this. Speed kills, but I mean slow speed. We're going to run through 3 rapid-fire case studies of absolute operational absurdity.
Exhibit A, 500 outsourced management coaches. When Dimon found this out, he immediately fired every single one of them. He asked the completely obvious question, whose job is it to coach if not management? If you're hiring an army of outsiders to manage your people, your internal managers literally aren't doing their jobs. It's just a massive failure of leadership masquerading as a corporate perk.
Then there's Exhibit B. The tech department was asked to cut down on unnecessary printing for financial reports, and they proudly came back offering an 8% reduction. Dimon completely rejected that. He physically grabbed the reports, pulled the people receiving them into a room, and just asked, "Do you actually read these?" By adding just a tiny bit of friction, he instantly cut 50% of the reports. The system will always try to protect itself, so you have to push back.
Exhibit C, the $50,000 printer. Instead of approving $2 million for a brand new Xerox machine, common sense actually won out. A savvy operator looked around and found the exact same machine still sitting in its box from a bankrupt company for just $50,000. It's a brilliant little reminder to look past the standard procurement catalogs and just use basic street-smart business sense.
And then there's the black car dilemma, which perfectly captures how bloated corporate rules end up costing way more than practical solutions. Employees were totally abusing the unmanaged corporate black cars. One person was even using it for their daily commute at an exorbitant cost. Dimon actually did the math and figured out he could literally buy that employee her own personal car, hire a dedicated driver, and it would still only be a third of the cost of the bureaucratic black car program. Hilarious, but a very sobering lesson in waste.
Let's pivot to Section 4, Common Sense Customer Focus. This is all about frontline reality and actually putting the customer first.
Here's the thing about external dashboards. They are completely meaningless if you aren't physically verifying the actual on-the-ground customer experience. Dimon's wife kept reporting a broken ATM at her local Walgreens. The outsourced vendor insisted their digital dashboard showed it was working perfectly fine. It actually took sending an internal manager to physically drive over there to confirm the screen was totally illegible. Dashboards lie, reality doesn't.
Or take the Banksville branch. The strict financial model, the net present value spreadsheet, said to close it down for cost savings. But common sense told a totally different story. Dimon realized that forcing a loyal little old lady to drive 6 miles on icy, winding winter roads would literally just hand those customers over to the competitors right across the street. The spreadsheet had zero human context, so they kept the branch open.
The overarching philosophy here is that the corporate headquarters, the whole galactic center, has to remember its one and only purpose is to support the frontline workers who are actually serving the customers. If you work in HR, legal, or finance, you only have a job because a client walked into a branch. Adopting that mindset radically shifts how a corporate office behaves.
Finally, Section 5, Leadership and Human Capital. Let's see how all this ties into the human element of leadership, because at the end of the day, companies are just collections of people.
When you dissect massive failures, like the infamous London whale trading loss, the root cause is almost never the actual math or the complexity of the derivatives. It's a catastrophic breakdown in basic communication. The wrong people were in the room. Information was hoarded like it was gold. And they deliberately bypassed the risk committee specifically because the trade was risky. That is the anatomy of human error, plain and simple.
And then you have the cold calculus of bureaucracy, where minor savings are prioritized over working families. A manager once decided to outsource the company's union security guards to save about $7,500 per guard. But to squeeze out that tiny saving, the new outsourced firm slashed the guards' family healthcare benefits from $30,000 down to $15,000. So these exact same people were doing the exact same dangerous job, but suddenly with a devastated safety net.
When Dimon found out about this, he was absolutely furious. He ordered every single guard to be rehired immediately, put directly back onto the company payroll, and had their pensions fully grandfathered in. His response was basically a mic drop. He said, JP Morgan does not need to make our profit off the backs of our guards, because corporate culture isn't what you write on a wall, it's what you actually do.
So as we close this case file, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought from Dimon to reflect on in your own world. If you were king or queen for a day in your department, or your team, or your entire company, what would you change? How would you cut the waste, kill the slow bureaucracy, and truly prioritize the humans in your business today? Don't wait for permission. Start asking those hard questions right now.